Good afternoon, Westwood, and welcome to the Wolverine Report. Charlotte Lynch is out, so we have Evan Cardamino helping out with the switches, Marie Fiscaldo, and I'm Morgan Donahue. And folks, we have a terrific guest. You know, when Evan and I were talking early on in the conversations about forming this podcast, we had certain guests that we kind of put out on the corner of the paper where the dream guests that we can have, but we had to kind of get the podcast to a place where we thought it was, in a place where we could potentially get them on. The two guests that we had was Kathy Delaney Smith being one. The other is our guest today. It's a person that needs no introduction. If you look at Westwood hockey, the face of hockey, probably the most important figure in Westwood hockey, it is this person. If there was a Mount Rushmore for players and coaches, I would have this person on both. The contributions that this person has brought to the program still live on today, and we will tell you why. But when you look at some of those contributions, just on paper, 91 graduate, won a state championship his senior year, 229 points, leading the highest all-time points leader in Westwood hockey history, 250 wins as a head coach. Wins are very difficult to come by. We've been talking about that in all the sports that we've been covering. 3 state championships, 2 were as a coach, 1 as a player. And then when you look at the 41 consecutive years that Westwood hockey has qualified for the state tournament, this person has been part of 21 of them. 4 as a player, 17 as a coach. But we are delighted and so excited to have Mike Welby on the podcast. Coach, how are you? And thanks so much for joining us.
Wow, what an introduction. That's amazing. Thank you very much for the kind words and also for the invite to be here today. It's been going great. I'm super happy to be here.
Absolutely. We really tried to tap into the alumni because there's a great story to tell. We had Kathy Delaney Smith on a month ago. We talked about sports winning culture, and a lot of that culture is still here today with the program. And there's no more obvious kind of use case for that than hockey. When you look at the streak, 41 years of making the state tournament, consecutive years. When Paul Lilla was on the podcast with us a couple weeks ago, he had mentioned that you were one of the best coaches he's ever been around.
Wow. And
I said one of the most impressive things I think that you did as a coach, it wasn't winning just state championships. It was getting some bad teams to qualify for the state tournament. And I mean it because that's a really good sign of good coaching, the discipline. What are some of your favorite memories? 17 years as a coach at Westwood. Were those memories of getting some of those teams that were less talented to qualify and be a part of this streak? Were those high up in your memories as much as those state championship wins?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's first of all, just to be able to go to the high school, come back and coach, be able to coach there was a tremendous honor. Yeah. And I remember going back that first time and applying for the job, and it was kind of an auspicious beginning. But but I remember being in the room with the person who was hiring me, and they said, "I'm going to tell you one thing: if you screw up, you'll be out of here so fast, your head will spin." Yeah. And I'm, at the time I'm 27 years old, and I'm like, "Oh, this is a good start," But but that was funny, and it just underscored how great of a tradition we had with the Westwood hockey program, all the way up from the 70s to the 80s, the 90s. There was a lot on the shoulders that, the point was, hey, make sure that you take this seriously and don't embarrass us, and, keep that tradition rich. So that was the start. But yeah, I mean, when you talk about some of the highlights, certainly winning the state championship that first year was awesome. Obviously, you were a freshman on the team at the time. And then, starting off 5-5 that year, and really being in jeopardy of losing that streak was really, as a player when I was there, was a huge concern. As a coach, it was like clear and present danger right there. Yeah. You start off 5-5 and you say, I don't want my name attached to the first team. And, I think it was, I forget how long it was at that point, not to make the tournament. So there was a little bit of a pressure at the start.
Did you know it was a streak then?
I did. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
We were
yeah.
aware of the streak.
Yeah.
And I think back then it really wasn't a very long streak.
No, it was like 20s, yeah, it was 20 something.
Yeah.
I think I was probably more aware of it later on. But they are very aware of it today. Like when being in the locker room with head coach Matt Siebed and coach Ferrari, it's on their mind, every single practice, every single game. And I see that pressure on them. But yeah, I'm just curious because I didn't really know about it till probably the second half of my high school career. And but that's so you've had some of that similar pressure, especially from the alumni.
Well, from the alumni, and plus I recall when I played, we never not made the playoffs. So I certainly didn't want that to be something that happened to these kids. As a coach, you want to see the kids succeed and accomplish as much as they can. There was always that kind of that initial thing of making the playoffs that was important to obtain. So
it's winning is difficult, especially a very competitive league. TVL is very competitive. And I look back when you were coaching our teams, there were battles. Medfield was always a battle. Even like our freshman year, Bellingham was a tough team. I think they were a TVL. I think we won the TVL with them and Medfield.
I believe that's
correct.
Year. Yeah.
And then Hopkinton's never been easy. Hopkinton made it to the state championship 2 years ago. It's a very difficult league, and you also put together a very difficult non-league, schedule. That year that you're talking about, starting off 5-5, we had games with Milton, Division I, games with Weymouth, Division I teams, and then Blue Hills, who Blue Hills far different team back then than it is now. Yep. You loaded that schedule up. Was that a schedule that you put together yourself, or was it kind of a schedule that was inherited, from just the previous coaches?
I think it was a little bit inherited as I try to think back, but I think there were a couple of holes that needed to be filled.
Yeah.
I remember specifically, needing 2 games, and the Blue Hills coach was, sure, we'll play you, and then so we filled it out. But I think what I took from that, and what the coaches always try to do, is to say, hey, look, we should be one of the better teams year in and year out in the TVL. So we need to get better by playing better teams outside as well. And, that was something my former coach, Dick Bradley, did. We played Weymouth. Back then it was Weymouth North, Weymouth South, Oliver Ames. We had no business playing some of those teams. And, we took our lumps in some instances, but there were others that we won.
Yeah.
And when you win some of those games, or you find out, hey, I can compete with some of the best teams in the state, the players' expectations rise, and at the same time, they get better and more confident.
For sure. So before you became the head coach, 2001 season, 2002 season. You were an assistant for a little bit. How long was that?
Assistant coach for a couple of years.
Yeah. Was Mac with you then too, or?
Mac helped. He helped out a little bit.
Yeah. Coach Stephen McDonald. Westwood alum as well.
Yeah. Well, he had a ski house up in New Hampshire. He had stuff in the winter he needed.
He was
to
in
get
the
to.
mid-20s too, so he's enjoying the weekends.
Yeah.
But I give you credit because you came back as assistant coach. Clearly, you loved the program. Mm-hmm. You had plenty to give back to the program. And then ultimately, when you became the program, what was that process like? There was a whole new athletic director at the time.
Yes.
Did you just kind of connect directly with Charlie Flahive on the new spot? How did that unfold?
Yeah, I mean, well, I worked with Charlie on getting the spot. And John, I forget his name now, but there was
Palmer.
Yes,
John
Palmer.
Palmer,
He was the new athletic director at the time.
Yeah.
And we didn't really have a relationship, but so it was primarily through Charlie. And Charlie and I had that connection, obviously, as I was a student athlete at Westwood.
Yeah.
I had been helping out for a couple of years with the hockey program. So we kind of had that Westwood connection.
I think you're kind of a son he didn't have. He loved hockey. There was no question about it.
Yeah.
But I think obviously you made some great memories for him in the early 90s. Not only that, you provided some amazing history for Westwood. 229 points over a career. That's a historic celebratory career. And then to have that in the program, that's like an AD's dream. To have someone that wore that uniform to come back, that knows what it's like, especially a team that practices at 5 a.m. That's not easy. How long has that been going on? And if you can provide some details of some of the positive things that you saw yourself as a player and the teams that got out, that got from waking up early and, going into frigid rinks and practicing at those hours? What would some of those be?
Yeah, well, you're right. So, I mean, getting up at 5 a.m. was something that's been happening with the program since, my oldest brother, Kevin, he's getting into his later 50s.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, they were practicing at 5 o'clock in the morning. And they had this relationship with Nobles where I think they got cheap ice.
Yeah.
And, there wasn't even a rink manager. Bradley would have the key, and he'd unlock the rink. So we had that early morning practice that had been in place since, I think the 70s, but let's just say the 80s, where, yes, there's discipline that goes into the mix when you're getting up at, you got to get up at 4:30 to get on the ice at 5. But what that instilled in me, as I remember as a player, was not only a camaraderie with my teammates saying, hey, everybody else is sleeping right now. We have a chance to get better right now. That was huge.
Yeah.
And it builds character. You got to be a little bit more disciplined with making sure your homework's done, in the afternoon or evening, getting to bed early. You can't go to bed at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And then, at the end of the day after school, when you're done, you're done. All these other people were going off to their practices, and I felt like it was a benefit to be able to get up early and get it done, and then move on with your day.
Completely agree. I think it creates a structure at a very important age. We're trying to turn these student athletes into men and to get them prepared for life. And when they get into professions, there's a high likelihood they're going to have to wake up early for a lot of important things, meetings, preparation for those meetings. But to have kind of a flavor of that, but also to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves, in a team. Yeah. And I do think it builds character. I'd always think third period, we had a little more extra in us because of the, just what we would do during this practice. They were hard practices. They weren't, walkthroughs.
No, they weren't. And that was, I go back to Dick Bradley as my coach in the 80s. He was no BS.
Yeah.
It was, you were working hard. If you weren't working hard, we were skating.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether you worked hard or not, we skated.
Yeah.
But it was something, to the effect of, what do they say? The legs feed the wolves.
Legs feed the wolves.
And that's kind of the mentality we adopted. And come third period in games, we had the ability to kind of outrun some teams because of that.
A lot of games are won in the third period. More importantly, games are closed in the third period.
Yeah.
You have a famous quote, when you're up a goal or two, they got to beat us in the clock.
Right.
Something that you would always say. And part of that is you got to have your legs.
Yeah.
And part of that too is, you got to have some good depth too. Allow your top lines to get a good breather, and you did a great job of that over the years, in putting together, lineups, with depth, everyone working hard, setting the tone. Everyone knew their roles too. Kind of those bottom lines, the third and fourth line were really those don't allow a goal, lines.
Right.
Go out, provide an energy burst, lay a few hits, get everyone fired up.
Yeah.
Was that kind of a similar style that you came from, and is that a style that you had brought, to your coaching style, when you started coaching?
Yeah, I think, at this level with high school hockey, whether, back then it was Division III, you kind of had what you had. You had the seed set of guys that were, you had some A players, and then you had some B players, and then you had other kids that, maybe didn't pick up the skates or do anything over the summer, and hockey wasn't their number one passion.
Yeah.
But those guys would come in and fill out those, those third lines, those fourth lines, and they'd typically be juniors or seniors. And you'd say, look, you have a place on this team, you have a part, and, this is going to be your role. So, a lot of the kids bought into that. And as a result, we had a lot of success. And I think what we did a good job of, and this isn't me, but this is my assistant coaches, it's really just helping the kids to determine or define, hey, this is what your role, this is what the expectation is. Just go out and do that. And, you'll be on the ice. And more importantly, everybody's role is for the betterment of the team to be successful.
And you were a good communicator with that too, where the kids knew. There was no kind of guesses of, kids weren't trying to, go through the fourth liners weren't trying to go through the legs and, Charlie every now and then.
Oh, yes. Charlie Donahue has a special place in my heart and Westwood High School hockey history.
One of your favorite speeches ever. I think it was Born Game or something,
Yep.
I want to talk about the early days. So 91 graduate, obviously 229 points accumulated. You had a hat trick in your first game. Talk to us a little bit about that. Do you remember that? And how cool was that to get off to a hot start like that?
Well, it was. I mean, it's such a wonderful memory. First of all, to think back on that. When I went into tryouts with the hockey team, I was initially a defenseman. 20 minutes into the tryout, the coach came over and said, "You're going to be a forward."
Interesting.
So I said, "All right, great." So I went out there and they put me on. I think I was on a line with Mark Carey and, I'm trying to think of the other guy. But I was playing with two older guys. I was the second line center. We played Oliver Ames. Oliver Ames had a phenomenal, so this is the caveat. Oliver Ames had a phenomenal goalie that was suspended for the first game of the year. So they had the backup in.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate. I had a great game and went out after with some friends, and someone said, do you know, you're the leading scorer in the state right now and you're 14 years old? And I laughed. And then, obviously the next morning that had changed because there were games later in the day. But what an awesome start to, and there was zero expectations. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was 14 years old. Some of these kids look like monsters to me out there. I just wanted to survive the game, forget about trying to thrive in it.
Oh, 100%. It's a physical game, and when people look at the game today, it's a different game today than it was then. Back then, everyone was hitting. It was be hit or hit or be hit.
Right.
And typically the teams that would make it deep into the state were the toughest. They could just handle that kind of game and be able to dish it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about some of those teams. So your freshman year, and then even going into sophomore and junior year, you had some great players around you. Could you see at that point that there was something special around the team that, by the time you guys were seniors and you had, years under your belt, that senior year would be as special as it was for you?
Well, so after that freshman year, I mean, we had a ton of seniors, a lot of juniors, but we had some really good seniors. You had Scott Blomquist, you had Tom Feeney, you had Brian Spellman, you had Billy Crone. You had all these kids that were so good, and they scored the majority of our points that year and really carried us. But then you look past that to sophomore year, and we had an okay senior class coming in, not a lot of forwards. I think Jim Carty, I think Steve McGann, who was a year ahead of me, so he was moving into his junior year. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a lot of scoring, but what we did have is we had goaltending, and I'll give a special shout out to my brother Brian, who was our senior goalie. And he was a tremendous goalie. He was hot for us that year. But we also had really good defensemen, and one of the defensemen we had, was Chris Ruggiero. Yeah. And Chris was just, I'm not a big guy, and I think I might have had an inch on Chris. But he played like he was 6'4", 220 pounds.
Coach Mack says he's the toughest defenseman he's ever seen come through the program.
Oh,
and wanted to highlight him. So I mean, it's a no-brainer. You're the most talented player to ever come through the program. I think if I had to rank the second most talented when you consider all positions, I think he's that guy. Points. This guy had close to like 100 points. He was a defenseman, folks. Tough dude. Mm-hmm. I've never met him. Rocco, I had as a coach in high school football at one point. Leadership, amazing leadership. I heard a story from Timmy Lewis. Shout out Timmy Lewis, terrific hockey player. He was a freshman. And some kid was bullying him in the high school, and Chris took care of it. Mm-hmm. And there was, he set that tone of no one's coming after my guys. And we lost, Chris, too soon.
Yeah.
What can you say about him and the impact he had to the program, but more so to you guys, his teammates, and the guys who obviously dearly loved him and miss him. Want to certainly highlight him because, heard his name so many times throughout the years, and want to do justice of just how talented this guy was.
Yeah, and you should. I think with Chris was a great guy, and I will say that example you just said about Timmy Lewis. Yeah. You knew right away with Chris if you were okay with him or not. Yeah. Like if you were on his side. Yeah. You were good. And, playing hockey, I think that gives you an immediate, hey, if you're a hockey player here at Westwood High, then, then you're my guy. Yeah. But that's just the type of guy Chris was. What you saw was what you got. And it was very genuine. Yeah. And as a person, I always had a ton of respect with him. We ended up playing a year or two might have just been a year at UMass Boston.
Yeah.
I followed him to UMass Boston.
Yeah.
And he was tremendous. He's just, like you said, he was gone too soon.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of coaching his son.
Yes. Awesome.
Still in contact with his son.
Yeah. Or he just got married?
He just got married. Yeah. Yep. He's been playing a lot of golf lately, though, so
Love
I don't
to
know
hear
how that mixes up. But yeah, Chris was a tremendous player.
Yeah.
Chris was a phenomenal person, gone too soon, and we all really do miss him.
For sure. If you'll notice on the boys hockey team, Chris is number 9.
He was.
And I don't believe 9 is played by anyone at Westwood. So as an honor to Chris, it's that jersey's been retired. So great job by yourself, Matt Siebert, to do that. I think it's deservedly so.
Absolutely, deservedly so. And I think it's a nice way to honor Chris. And as the years go on, obviously a lot of people aren't gonna know who Chris was. They're not gonna know how he was as a hockey player, except through these stories. But when someone's numbers get taken out of the rotation, in a high school program like that, it really says a lot about the person, not only as a player, but I think their character as well.
For sure. As mentioned, he was number 9. Coach, you were number 4. What went into choosing that? Were you a big Bobby Orr fan?
A little bit, yeah. I was a little bit of a Bobby Orr fan, but my brother Kevin, who was a 1984 graduate, he wore number 4. Yeah. So, I looked up to my brother Kevin. I idolized him, and, I saw him out there in the games, and all I wanted to do was just, be the type of player that he was.
Yeah.
And Kevin he played 3 years on varsity. He was a defenseman, and he scored a lot, kind of like Chris. When he was playing at Westwood. So number 4 was kind of already in the family, and that's kind of why.
So you're proud of him, and you kind of wanted to honor your brother, like
oh sure.
Hey, I'm going to carry on this Welby legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris was. Kevin was the first one through. So Kevin was the first one through. My brother John didn't play, but my brother Brian did. Yeah. And Brian was 2 years older than me.
He was a goaltender.
He was a goalie, and honestly, it was awesome to be able to play with your bigger brother.
So when I went into freshman year, for whatever reason, 4 was open. I'm like, oh, it's my favorite number, anyways. And Bobby Orr.
They didn't retire that yet?
Well, I was like, what an idiot. Nobody told me that this was Mike Welby's number, so shout out to you for being nice, for allowing me to use that. I wasn't aware at the time until you told me. And at that point, the chess move was already, the hand was off the piece. Uh-huh. But a great number. Bobby Orr was my favorite, even though I didn't, decades behind. But just what he did to the game, and how he played and all that, was definitely something that struck with me.
Yeah, without a doubt. Number 4 is a great number. I tried to get my son, who's now playing, or he's 13 years old, but the first couple years I got him the number 4, and then one year he's like, I don't want 4. Yeah, he's like, I want 91.
That's the thing now, is these high numbers. These kids like it. The Stamkoses.
He's a big Stammer fan.
Yeah.
So but number 4 always had a special place.
Well, good for him. He's we'll talk about him a little later. What a talent he is, and he's going to cement his own legacy. There's no question about that. The 91. I like that number. It's definitely, it's got some swagger to it.
It does. I don't think Coach Bradley or any of the other coaches would have let us.
You can't even find anything over 30. 31 I think is the highest you'll see, and it's like the triple XL. It's meant for if you have someone 6'5",
exactly.
So the 229 points. Who are some of the players that contributed the most out of those points? Who were the guys that they dumped it in, and then you picked it up, scored a goal, and got the apple?
Yeah, more like they crashed the net and took everybody out, and it was just there for me to tap home.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate to play for 4 years at the varsity level, and I got to play with some really good players. So that freshman year, Mark Carey was awesome. Ruggiero was great. But, moving up into the other years, Steve McGann was a great line mate. My cousin Timmy Harrington and Scott Butters were my line mates my senior year. Yeah. And we just had this connection, especially the cousin connection with Timmy. We'd always played street hockey together. We'd always skated together on the same line when we were growing up. So we kind of had that connection. Yeah. And of course, Scott was a talented right winger as well, who was more the banger guy. Yeah. But he would go in, clean shop, and then
you gotta win the battle in the corner, and then your IQ's through the roof where you time that well, and that kind of that little hole, that gap to go to on timing, quick shot, quick goal.
Yeah, I always took a circuitous route when I was the F1 guy. I didn't.
I used to see your little serpentine while you waited for the
those
win.
guys go in. I'll hang out here and I'll just wait. But no,
a system that worked out very well.
Sure.
Wanted to also get, who are some players, you mentioned those players that you played with. Mm-hmm. Who can you give shout outs that were, before your time in the 80s? So one example is when I was a kid, and Tim Holden shares the same sentiment, where we were at that Eastern Mass Championship game. Yeah. My dad says, look out for this kid right here. His dad said the same thing to him. This kid is special. When he's got the puck, something magical is going to happen. And that stuck out with me because I'm like, I want to be that. I want to be that guy. Yeah. And my dad had to remind me, that was Mike Welby, when I was a kid, because I was probably I was 5 years old, 6 years old. So I didn't know names then.
That's it. It's so funny to hear that, because this is no joke. I was you in 1985 at Boston University watching Westwood play in the state finals. And I was there with all my buddies, Joe Peters, Brian Cox. Yeah. Brian Cox was also an instrumental guy in my success as well. And we're there watching Saul Cohen. We're watching Jimmy Conway, Paul Hardiman. Paul's brother Brian was my year as well. He was on a different line, but shout out to him. He scored in 22 straight high school hockey games. I mean, he found a way to put the puck in the net. Yeah. But those were the guys. Yeah. And, I was sitting there, probably a little bit older than you, but going, wow, I can't believe you're looking around to see how many people are at this game to come watch these high school kids play. And they look like heroes out there, and they won the game. I think they scored in overtime to win it. It was just berserk, but it was one of those things where it was like, I can't wait to play for Westwood High School.
There's something special about it. When you see players at that level, they're different. Mm-hmm. They're dialed in, they're locked in, and they're very confident. So it's not just, I want to be the guy who's going to score that goal. I want to be that man. I want to be that person who has that confidence, that doing it in a Westwood jersey, the town that you're in, and to see what it does. You come home after a state championship and you got a police escort with the fire trucks. You then go out to meet the governor at the state house. The school committee gives you awards and whatnot. Right. Those are so special, a really special part of that. And it's still today. When we were winning and we won a state championship, Matt Siebert was in the crowd, and at those games. I don't think he missed any games. And he talks about how that fired him up. He really wanted to be a part of that. That alone, too. Mark Zarther was at St. Sebastian's his freshman year and said, you know what? I got 5 NHL players, ahead of me on the depth chart. And then there's probably about 15, 20 D3 players, that I'm going to have to compete with for times. I want to go to Westwood, and win some titles and state championships. Yeah. And he came over because of that win, and being in the crowd. So it's really some of the best marketing for your sports is when you have these winning teams and these kids go to it as an age. Yep. Girls lacrosse. You see all these girls, middle school and girls at Sheehan and Pine Hill or whatnot at these games. Yeah. Watching their heroes.
Right. And you mentioned Mark Zarther. I always knew one of my kids was going to make it to the NHL someday. Yes, I just didn't know it was in operations. I thought it'd be on the ice. But
shout out Mark. Also podcast, so check it out if you haven't. It's great conversation. Ultimately, your senior year, you guys went out on top. There's no better way to do that. Big win at the Garden for the Eastern Mass Championship, and then big state championship went out in Springfield.
Yes, West Springfield.
Yep. And you had a hat trick in that game.
I did. Yeah. Yes, I did. And it was, again, one of those surreal moments. The puck just happened we won the face-off on the opening draw. Puck goes down. We go in, and my line mate, Timmy Harrington, shot the puck. Everybody collapsed towards him. Again, me wide open, right off the side, and I just tapped it home.
Making it easy for you.
Yeah. 11 seconds in. But that game, that was such a special game. It was just unbelievable in terms of the feeling you get being on top and winning. And I don't care if it's Division III or Division II, or if it's debate club, or if it's a youth spring, baseball game. When you feel like that, you get a lot of confidence and you feel great. And that's one of those memories in life that I felt so great about, and we'll never forget.
I read a great story. You scored that third goal. and your dad was at the game. He didn't make it to many games, but he was at that game.
Yeah.
Threw his hat on the ice.
Yep.
And you saw it. You picked it up. You kept it.
I did.
Do you still have it?
I do.
Yeah.
I do still have it. Yeah, it's, growing up, our family life kind of went into a crossroads. My parents got divorced, and my dad just never really made it to a lot of the games.
Yeah.
And, for him to be in that game or at that game was super special.
Yeah.
And, fortunately I had the hat trick, and, I saw him throw the hat over, and I was able to grab that. It was a really special moment.
That's awesome. You know what, everyone knows you for coaching, and what you did production wise. I was able to see a lot of the stuff you did kind of internally. And one thing that you did a really good job of is you really looked out for the kids. There were kids that had lost their dad at like young ages, and you really were, there to support. You let them know you were there. That was awesome. Was that something that kind of, you wanted to, be there to support? How did that come to fruition? Really.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's losing a parent's never easy. I don't care how old you are, and one of the things about life as you get older is you tend to, have to worry more about your parents as they get up into their 70s and 80s, but when you're 14, 15 years old, the last thing you're thinking about is losing a parent. And that's devastating, and that's life altering to a certain extent. And I kind of felt that, and I don't really know why. I mean, I lost, when I was young, I was 4. I lost a son. Not a son. Yeah. I wasn't a dad at 4.
Yeah.
I lost a brother at 4 years old, and I was too young to really understand it. But as you get older, you kind of think about that stuff. And there's a special place that kind of gets formed in your heart for other people who go through some of that sadness and sorrow. And, like I said, to be 14 or 15 or 16, and have that happen to you, when you see that, I think it's the human in all of us that kind of feel and gravitate towards these kids to want to make sure that they're okay and be there for them in some capacity. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately there were, we had a couple of those instances that happened, and, it's a tough thing in life to deal with.
No, you did a fantastic job with that. And it's something that goes beyond the sport. And, I definitely, want to give you a shout out for that, because it's something that I think a lot of people don't know of, or are aware of. They just look at the wins, they look at the, why isn't my kid playing enough? It's in any sport, they get that. But this is, you're getting these kids ready for life. We've been talking about that with a lot of different, coaches in sports. Tim Holden had a great quote about kind of like the impact, and, we can transition into, that 2001 team, but with the focus on the impact that you provide to these kids outside of just winning games, there's that impact is still there, Coach.
Yeah.
Tim Holden, one of the most talented, decorated players, him and his brother to come through Westwood, unbelievable talent. He said, I played a lot of sports in my life, and I've never had a better coach than Mike Welby. I always looked up to him. I remember my parents taking my brother and I to see him play state tournament games in the early 90s for Westwood. Mike was the assistant coach at Westwood High School for our freshman year and sophomore years. I tried to replicate his moves, learn new skills from him at every practice. He was the kid who had 229 points for the Wolverines, the all-time leading scorer, and I felt lucky to have him as a coach. For our junior and senior seasons, Mike was the head coach, and our team took on his identity. We were tough, smart, and everyone on the team was solely focused on helping the team achieve its goals. As I've grown older, I've realized that the useful skills and strategy he taught us were just a mechanism to get his real message across, that it's necessary to get the little things right. The importance of being a good teammate, to play the game the right way. All of his teaching went way beyond hockey, which is actually why we had such great hockey teams. Every day I use the lessons Coach Welby taught me, whether it be in my career, with my family, and even coaching our kids. I owe a lot to Mike Welby.
Wow.
Now, what does it mean, and how does it feel to know that your impact is, 20 plus years later, like is still instilled in a guy like Tim Holden, who's a hockey Hall of Fame legend at Westwood?
Right. It means a lot. It's very flattering. Obviously, it means that our message got across. And, you know, look, the message doesn't resonate across every kid, but all you can do is have a certain vision and see if, you know, people will follow that. Obviously, with the Holdens there, it did. And, you know, again, that's so flattering to hear. But I look back, and one of the greatest days of my life is when I see my old high school hockey coach, Dick Bradley. Yeah. He lives down in Florida now. I think he's up in the summers, but there's just that he had that special place in my, you know, in my heart, and I'm like, whenever I see him, you know, I feel the exact same thing that,
you light up.
That they said. Yeah, for sure.
You light up, and you pick up where the conversation was left off.
Absolutely.
You know, there's no like, you know, are they a different person? No, that it's literally like just the two souls connecting because they have that common, you know, piece of them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You got that common piece. And then you have, you know, the conversation shifts to how are the kids? How's the family? How's everybody doing? How's mom and dad? And, you know, they become more of an extension of your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, him and his brother mentioned so talented. How special were they for you? You know, have you seen any, you know, talent like that? I mean, you don't see too many twin. You saw another twin brothers that weren't, you know, near that. But how special were they for you?
Very special. Not only because they were decent hockey players, but because they're super people.
Yes.
And you think about their parents, who were excellent people, just the best. And they raised their kids the right way. But when I look back at Tim and Phil, it reminds me a lot of my cousin Tim and myself as line mates. You had a knack of where everybody was, and you always kind of looked out, and they certainly had that between those two. So
it was unbelievable too. So getting back to kind of that 2001, 2002 team, I believe Tim had mono for a bunch of the year. Phil broke his wrist and played with it. At one point, he just said, you know what? I don't know. I can't hold a stick, let alone shoot a puck.
That's right.
You know, that really says a lot about who they are, like fighting through that. And, you know, I think that might have been part of like the early part of that season of the identity of this team. What is this team? You know, having some tough 1-goal losses. Ultimately, when did you start seeing kind of the forest through the trees that year? You know, where you're like, this team is special. And now, you know, when you had a 5-5 start, you're probably thinking, and I think you said, we're not going to win the TVL title.
Yeah.
We ended up winning it. But at what point were you like, was there a point in the season where you're like, okay, you know, now we're cooking with some oil here?
Yeah. It was obviously a very tough start, like we talked about. And I think back to those practices, we skated you guys quite a bit. And it was, you know, those practices, I think we did 26 Montreals, one practice. That's where you really figure out, all right, are they going to come in and jump us in the coach's room, or are they going to band together? And you guys banded together. And then, you know, after a couple of those, we kind of figured out, all right, it's 5-5. We went out, we won our next game. We actually didn't lose a game the rest of the way.
If I'm not, it was like 11
sorry,
in a row.
We did lose. We did.
Blue Hills.
Blue Hills. Yeah. Sure, that's in there
well,
somewhere.
We're going to talk
about it.
Yeah, you know that was on the list. You knew that was on there.
That was bad assistant coaching. So
it was. I agree. Great leadership on that team. Peter Barr, John McDonough, Mark Riley, Adam Packer. You know, even Brian Fairmonti.
Sure.
You know, did you know that you were inheriting these guys, you know, from your assistant coaching days?
Yeah, I mean, well, I kind of knew, right? Because I'd been in the program, I was coaching, and you know, I knew they were in that funnel. But yeah, I mean, you talk about, and you look at those groups you just talked about, those guys. They were tough as nails.
Yes. Not
the most talented players, but they were smart.
Yeah.
And they knew what their role was. You know, John McDonough was a senior. He was a second line winger, but probably not the most talented kid ever.
Yeah.
But you told John, do X, he did X.
Simple game.
Yeah. Same with Packer. Same with Riley. Almost to the point with Mark, you had to be like, I
tone it down a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want you to kill anybody.
He was an all-scholastic football player, and I think Mac just loved having this guy because he was a linebacker out on the ice, and he used to, and Tom True too.
True.
You get those two together.
Yeah.
There was so much depth too. You had, you know, Bill Crowley, Matt Sims, Ryan Kehoe, you know, playing as a freshman, big part of that team. But you know, what a special group. And I think what happened is I used to go to those games before you coached, and you could see they were a good team, but I don't think they knew how to be used in the right way, or what their roles were.
Sure.
You came in, you provided structure. You also kind of provided, what are their individual roles? You could have a first line guy. He's got a completely different role than Mike Welby, playing center. So setting that expectation, but the system too was huge. Your system is still part of today's game. Third guy high, anticipation, all of those. Were those your systems in high school, or those things that you kind of got from the college level and brought into you?
Yeah, I think a little bit of my coaching really kind of was derived from, I had all the different coaches I had throughout my high school and college career, and I had some great coaches. So what I wanted to do is take a little bit of each of their coaching mentality that I thought was great, and try and smash it into one particular concept. Yeah. But beyond that, though, in order to be successful, like the success that we had, you really have to have good people around you and your assistant coaches.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Steve McDonald, we had Brian Whalen, still the baseball coach today up there.
Yeah. Nolte,
Al Pecoraro, and some of these other
Tommy
guys.
McCusker,
absolutely. Like all these, like you can't be successful without good people around you.
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys are great people.
They do the small, the micro. There's the macro and the micro part of things. Yeah. And when you get Coach Mack who's saying blue line, take them at the blue line, and really kind of focused in on the physicality of that. And then you have Coach Nolte who's working with the goaltenders on what to look for, how to help out in the breakout. When to go for the puck behind the net, when to not. Small things like that. Yeah. They really do help kind of solidify those pieces, even the coaching staff.
Sure.
How important did you think it was to have Westwood alums on your coaching staff?
Well, I thought it was very important.
Yeah.
I mean, they know what the kids are going through. A lot of people don't get up at 5 a.m. or get up at 4:30 to go to a 5 a.m. practice. So Coach McDonald knew about that. McCusker, Pecoraro, all these Westwood alum kids, even Maddie Siebert, who's there now, they kind of knew what to expect. So it was really important. And then you sprinkle in some of these other guys that weren't from Westwood but have strong ties, like Brian Whalen. Yep. And you just got to.
He loves Westwood. He's a Norwood guy. It's funny. My dad's a Norwood guy, but these guys, they're Westwood guys. They love Westwood.
Absolutely. And Brian was awesome. My first year, he would go and watch other games. He'd scout games. He'd go and look at teams that we potentially see in the playoffs. It was so great to have people that were willing to do that on your staff.
Married to 91 class member, alum, and terrific soccer player.
Yes.
Lori Thornton.
She's the best.
She's absolute best. The best. Shout out Lori. So back to that 2001 team, playoff wins. Bellingham was the first round. Latin Academy 1 seed. The Dragons were slayed. They slayed the Dragons, which was a huge win. They were a good team. They had this kid Driscoll on the team who was he ended up playing, I think, Holy Cross the next level. Went to Thayer the next year. Yep. I don't know if you knew this, but when we played Milton, the first game of the year, Keith Yendo was a defenseman on that team.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'll show you in the that booklet. He was a freshman defenseman on that team.
That's funny.
So Latin Academy, the next round, South Boston High School. Mm-hmm. They had a kid on that team that had 120 points that year. Melissa, these two brothers, but they were 2 lines.
Yeah. That was...
Game after that, Concord Carlisle. Nice win at your a place you're well familiar with, UMass Boston.
Yep.
Shout out, Coach. Got us the home locker rooms for that game.
That's right.
And the thing is, Coach, you had so many great relationships. Obviously, there you had great relationships with the refs. I remember we had it was Paul Stewart's brother.
Yes.
And he knew you from your playing days. I actually had him as a ref in college for football. He did football games too.
Oh, wow.
I specifically remember him saying before that game, I don't want to use this whistle. I don't want to, you guys play the game the right way. You won't hear from me. I don't think there was any penalties that game. It was back and forth, and I loved it.
So he was, Billy Stewart, Paul Stewart, NHL referee. Their dad was an NHL official, I believe, as well. So huge hockey family from Jamaica Plain.
Yeah.
Billy also officiated my high school year senior state championship game.
No kidding.
Yeah, and he called me for a hook with 3 minutes left.
Was the game set by
No,
then?
it was a 3-2 game at the time, but it was warranted.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah,
he came and he went over and he was great. He said, look, the only reason why I called that is because you took away a scoring opportunity. If this happened out in the neutral zone, it would have been a call.
Well, you know what? Yeah. To be able to explain it like that, you don't get that opportunity often from refs.
Sure.
They just say, get in the box, don't talk to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, good for him.
Yeah.
And, he was a legend. The next game, Blue Hills. So I just want to preface this. We had 2 games versus them in the regular season.
Yep.
They kicked the snot out of us.
Yeah, I wouldn't even call them games.
No.
We got crushed.
One was one was kind of like the first quarter of the season, and then the last one might have been the last game of the year.
It was the last game of the year.
So it was like a really good dress rehearsal for the playoffs, and we're like, so we lost the first one. I think it might have been 7-1, 7-2. The last one, I think we scored a couple more. I think it was like 7-3. And you weren't happy. You're like, this is this is what this team's capable of doing, and the playoffs start next week. I think we certainly got a lot of skating in that week. We win these games, which was difficult. You had to win like 7 games just to get to the state championship.
That was quite a ride back then.
So we beat Concord Carlisle at UMass Boston, and then who are we facing in the Eastern Mass Championship? Blue Hills. They had this kid Ryan Moore. I think he had like 300 points.
Yep. Tremendous player.
I think he might have played for 7 or 8 years. I think there's some asterisks on those point totals.
But still very talented either way.
So talented. He was probably 3 points a game kind of guy. Gifted player. Ended up playing at Curry, I believe, Curry College.
Yep.
Had the place packed. It was at Walter Brown. And probably a special place for you. You played some big games there.
Sure.
Shout out to you again. You got us a great locker room. I don't know who you know, but we were like on couches. We had like couches, and I think we were in like the BU like ping pong room where they had like all the like. It was a lot of space, but it was very comfortable. We came out there, upset them. I forget the score. Was it 5-2, 4-2? Might have been an empty netter.
It was 4-2. Yeah.
Is that one of the most memorable wins of your life? And where does that rank? Obviously state championships are higher on your list, but this was something that was this is kind of miracle on ice type stuff.
Well, you don't win a state championship game without winning that game.
Yes.
And of course, I think, the message at the end of that last regular season game where we lost by a ton of goals was to, really, this could be a team we face if we do well. And I think they're beatable.
Yeah.
They were beatable, and we ended up beating them. But it was more of trying to get the message across to you guys, because you do sit there as a player sometimes and you say, "Oh my God, this guy's got 90 points this year. His line mates got 75. Their defense are huge." There's an intimidation factor for any kid at that stage where they're like, "Man, we've lost this team 2 times already. It's not going to probably go well." But to our luck, we got going early. We scored that first goal, and that was something I think was a huge plus in our column, because they were never used to being down. They crushed teams. They outscored teams, I think, all season by 5 or 6 goals. They played in I forget the name of the league, the Mayflower League maybe, and they just crushed teams. So they never had that adversity.
No.
We had the adversity because we played Milton. We played
Battle-tested.
them. Yeah. So that was a huge plus for us. I think McDonough scored that goal. I think it went off his leg.
He had one in the state championship too.
Jeez.
I believe. And Prue had one.
Yeah.
Freshman.
Huge.
There's a really cool picture in that game. You hands up on the bench. I don't know if you remember that picture.
Yes, I do.
I'll see if I can track it down, but Paul Lilla remembered it. But on the game, it was just like you looking up and just so thankful of such a great.
I forgot.
memory.
I do remember that.
Yeah,
but
yeah. And then that was the Eastern Mass. Had one more game at the Garden versus Westfield, very large town. 30,000 person town versus humble Westwood, 16,000. Do you remember the night before that game, the pasta dinner, what we watched?
Well, I do know. Where were we? Over at McDonough's house?
It was either McDonough's or bars, but we had pasta dinner, but we watched something that I think was pretty impactful for the following day.
I do remember it.
So we watched Miracle on Ice. Miracle, the movie wasn't out yet, but if you haven't seen on HBO, they have a documentary on that team. And Herb Brooks has a line, and it was kind of similar to our path, where they had to beat the Russians, and that wasn't the championship game. They still had to win the next game versus, I think it was Sweden.
Yeah.
And Herb Brooks in the locker room says to the team, his last thing he said is, and I'm gonna keep it PG, is if you lose this game, you're gonna take it to your grave. He walks like 2 steps, looks back, and says, "Your effing grave." And that stuck out with us. Like, we just had this big win. Don't want to have a letdown. You're playing a tough team in a Western Mass team in Westfield. And I remember that, as a really cool thing, that kind of kept us focused.
Yeah.
Even though we went down 2 goals early.
Yeah, it wasn't the best way to start a state championship
But I
game,
think that's what happened on their team too. I think they went down a couple goals early, the 1980 team, and then came back. But
well, the message was the same. It was, David versus Goliath type of matchup, at the D3 level.
Yeah.
You said town, Westfield's an actual city.
Yeah.
And, the way things were structured back then with tournaments and the alignments, it's like, how are we at 14,000 people back then, playing a town or a city that has, over 2 times as many people. But, still to come out and play and win that game. And, really, I like the togetherness of that team. I like the way they battled back and they responded well to adversity.
Mm-hmm. I do want to also talk a little bit about, just want to say shout out, Coach. That was one of the best memories of my life. St. Patty's Day too.
Oh yeah.
And I'll never forget that one. So it was
same with me. One of the best days of my life.
Walk together in history.
Yeah. You think about the great things in life. My marrying my wife, having our children. These state championship games are kind of this. They're not really the same, obviously, but they elicit the same type of emotion and happiness.
It's forever.
Yeah.
And I try to tell these kids, I go, these games you have with your teammates, the best memories of your life, there's a high likelihood that your teammates are going to be in your wedding.
Yeah.
Coach Welby's, good friend, Stephen McDonald, not only were they in each other's wedding, they're godfathers of each other's kids.
Yeah.
And they were teammates. So I'm just trying to, these are some of the best times, and memories that you have with your kids, or excuse me, with your teammates.
Right.
I'd be remiss not to talk a little bit about 2016. I remember the year before, I was coaching JV at the time. Yeah. Tough loss for us, Oliver Ames. I think it went to a shootout. Tough way to really go.
Yeah.
Did you think that was a big factor going into that next year of just like, we have a great team, but we got a chip on our shoulder looking at, our opponents and what we're going to accomplish?
Yeah, we were certainly talented. That's for sure. We had some really, really good players. One of the things I think was forgotten was, at the beginning of the year, we had we had Chris Dyson, who was a goalie.
Yeah.
But probably a little bit better of a goalie at the time anyways, that certainly changed, was another goalie. And he was going to be pinned to probably be the starter.
Yeah.
He left. I think he went to play juniors, or I forget where he ended up going. But Chris Dyson, the total consummate player who's like, I've got the chip on my shoulder because I'm behind this guy, took that position and literally was one of the main reasons why we ended up having the season that we had. Chris was tremendous.
I remember that year before, it was actually a very talented goalie you guys had, and he went on to play a different team next year. And Chris didn't have that much action. He kind of played a couple games his junior year. So he went into that senior. He had a great personality, and he was funny. I remember, at one point you're trying to calm the guys down in the middle of a period, or in between periods, and you said, "What are you guys thankful for?" You had a funny response, in the locker room, got the guys, laughing.
Yeah.
Senior year was different. He came in focused. He came in dialed. Yeah. And, he was remarkable. 24 goals in 24 games.
Right.
He had some help, though, too. When you have the likes of Joe Reisfelder, in my opinion, top 5 defenseman ever to come through to play at Westwood, just a total badass.
Yep.
Played like 30 minutes a game, block shots, power play, penalty kill.
He did it all. Yeah.
Stud. Jimmy Conway, heck of a player. R.J. Massimio, J.R. Seeley, Ben Shields.
Yeah.
Your forwards were pretty talented too. I did a little kind of shout out to that team on the Westwood Calls account.
Yeah.
And one thing I mentioned was Ken Mackin, in my opinion, one of the more talented goal scorers to come through the program since the Holdens.
Yep.
Would you agree with that?
Easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like good. What a skater. He had moves. He kind of had similar to you. Like, and I have a question about that too. Is you're one of the best dekes I've ever seen. Like you had patience on it. You'd fake the shot, hold. The goalie falls over. He's on his face, and then you got basically a wide open net.
Yeah.
Is that something you just worked in the driveway all those years? Because Ken had a similar deke.
Well, I think it was something where you found something that worked, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go with this. If I ever tried to go to my backhand on a breakaway, I don't think I was even going to lift the puck up. But
It's tough. Yeah.
But yeah, you find something and it stuck, and but Kenny was the same type of player. I think he was he was kind of my size, diminutive, but he was fast.
Played a big game.
Played a big game and had good hockey IQ, and really had himself a tremendous senior year.
Nicky Conway.
Yeah.
What a heater he was on in the playoffs.
Yes.
It was like 2 goals a game.
Yeah.
He scored
Yeah.
I think that first one like within the first minute.
Yeah.
Off to a hot start.
Oh.
Which I think you love to see the goal, but part of you is like, oh, I hope they don't get complacent.
Yeah, right.
But what a heater he went on. And then you had guys like Chris Eldridge, like football player, kind of like that old school mentality of those guys going in the corners, win those battles. Mike Riley had a little bit of that on him.
Yeah.
Be kind of the kid who would make some big hits where you had to say, hey, tone it down a little bit.
Yep.
John Clancy is a good goal scorer.
Yeah.
Owen Fox. Son of a guy you grew up with, went to high school with, played with,
Foxy.
as well as Nick Conway. Obviously you mentioned his father earlier. Jimmy Conway.
Yeah, it's the bloodlines, right,
Yeah.
of Westwood High School hockey. All these people that played come back, live in Westwood, and now their kids play.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I just saw Nicky Conway for the first time in years last week. It was so awesome to bump into him.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's what it is. It's the bloodlines in the town that they run deep.
Yeah, and it's just I'll never forget that team. I was a JV coach with Coach Ferrari in the program. He's still here as an assistant. 24 goals, 24 games. They were in Division II that year. They moved up a division. Remarkable. To do that, and that was certainly rewarding. I'm sure. Is that certainly top memory for you?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I won a state championship as a hockey player in D3.
Yeah.
I won one in D3 as a coach, and we then won one as in
That was
D2.
one for the critics.
Yeah.
One for the critics.
Exactly.
D3. Well, we
Yeah.
beat Concord Kyle, a heck of a team.
Well, I think what's really odd, and that just want to make a quick point about this, is that at Westwood High, first of all, in the town of Westwood, you have so many great hockey players. They're really good, but the problem is you have Severian in your backyard. You get Nobles, you get Sebs, you get all these places that I don't want to say pilfer, but the kids have bigger opportunities. So those kids go, and then you have the juniors, and then ultimately what you end up with is kind of a fraction of that talent pool.
True.
And to these kids' credit that come in, they work hard, they understand their role, and they execute it to the best of their abilities, and you end up getting the most out of them because of that. And
For sure.
That's what.
Speaking of Sebs, your son Chris Welby
Yes.
just had his first day there on Wednesday. I've seen him play. What a terrific talent he is. He's got
thank
that
you.
Mike Welby IQ. He's got size. It must be coming from the Riley side.
Yeah.
But he's an exceptional talent, and I think that's the right play for him. Just to be able to play at one of the top hockey programs in the country, that's awesome. How proud are you of him, and how excited are you to see him play at such a great school?
I'm so proud of Chris,
Yeah.
and I'm proud of my daughter Katie too. Katie's in the hockey vortex now as well.
Heard Coach Max helping coach one of her teams.
He's in the same system. So
Okay.
yeah, but yeah, no, with Chris, obviously, to be contradictory, obviously, he's going to St. Sebastian's, but I think the fit is there. There's a number of reasons why, but yeah, Chris has had a great start to his hockey career. When he was younger, we didn't need to pull him out of bed to go to this or that. So it was great, and that's when you find out, okay, he really likes this sport. He's really willing to put in the time and the effort. So it's been so much fun watching him develop as not only a person, but a player. And, my wife, Erin, and I are just so fortunate to have Chris and Katie as our kids. And they're good kids, and
that's awesome.
And it's fun. Yeah. So, he started over at St. Sebastian's, and it's we'll see how it goes, but
no-brainer decision though. Like with his talent, it's the right place to be, and I'm looking forward to seeing seeing a lot of games over there. It's some of the best hockey you'll see in the country. When you get some of these teams that come in and it's a 10-minute drive down the street, and some of these kids are already drafted in the NHL. Like it's pretty cool. I got to play in the Seb's Christmas tournament when I was prep school at Bridgeton, did a post-grad year.
Yep.
And I'm looking and I see Jack Parker, I see, Bruce Crowder, Jerry York. They were all in the crowd walking through, no other place, where you're going to see those kind of, people at games like that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You're on a different level. So it's, that it is interesting though to walk in and see those people.
So you retired in 2018?
Yes.
Yeah. So shout out to you. You, Matt Siebert, had been coaching as an assistant coach for you. I think it was like 9 years. Mm-hmm. You didn't leave him high and dry. You left him with a pretty good team, and kudos to you. It's easy to kind of pick a year where you see the writing on the wall, and you're like, good luck. Here you go. Yep. You didn't do that. Was that important to you to kind of leave that in a good place?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of things that went into the decision. Ultimately, that played a part. But as going back to Chris and Katie, being away on Wednesdays and Saturdays for the high school games put a lot on my wife, put a lot on the kids, because she was taking them to their games, and I wasn't able to get to some of them. So it ended up, I coached for 20 years. I missed some of Chris's stuff and Katie's stuff, and I said, I think I'm at a point where I'd rather enjoy that side of the thing of life now, with watching them play and even coaching. I coached them for a little bit. Rather than be, staying at Westwood High. So.
Well, I love hearing my neighbor, Eric Remiza saying, talking about F1, F2, and some of these, systems that you have.
Eric and Leslie are the best.
They are the best. So, leaving in 2018, Matt Siebert becomes the head coach, and he's done a terrific job with the program. He's since continued the streak. They've had some great teams, had some great wins. I was able to coach a couple years, and it was awesome. Had some big wins on the road. How special is it to see, one of your players, but also one of your assistants, kind of take over that leadership? And, have you been keeping up with the team, keeping tabs on the team over the years since you, have retired?
Yeah. Well, it's first of all, it's been, it's great to see Matt take over. I think he's done a tremendous job. But again, it goes back to like the Westwood guys that played for me, that also played in the program, that are now back coaching, like you when you were coaching. It's just great to have the alumni from the hockey programs come back and be a part of the team.
For sure.
But for Matt, it's been fun to watch. I know they're gearing up for the season another couple months, so it'll be exciting to go over and watch them play. I only saw them play a couple times last year. One was against Canton, though, which was a great game. Talk about
every year you play them tough.
Yeah, exactly.
You're speaking of Canton, that 2016 year, you guys beat them twice, once in the regular season, once in the playoffs.
Yeah,
it was a heck of
and they were a very good team. And you sit there and say, "Oh God, we're playing this team in the playoffs after we beat them once." There's that revenge factor, and fortunately we pulled it out. But Canton historically has always had a great hockey program, and even more so with Coach Schumann as
done
at
a terrific
helm.
job. Yeah, Westwood teacher as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you miss it?
I don't know. To be honest with you,
it's a lot.
It is a lot, but I don't. I'm so occupied with other things now. With Katie and Chris's hockey.
You love being a dad.
It's the best in the world.
Yeah,
it's the best thing in the world to be a dad and to be able to watch your kids or raise kids and see them become different people as they're going through their stages. It's just so rewarding. It's one of life's greatest rewards, in my opinion, and I enjoy watching it, and I absolutely hate missing it. So that was part of the conflict when they were younger, and now that they're doing bigger and greater things, I want to see my daughter Katie's game this weekend down at Cranston, Rhode Island.
Let's go. Let's get the bus. We'll get the den ready.
Yeah. As you did, she's also playing U12, which is their first game Sunday. So there's some good, still some seats available. I don't know if there's any good seats, but there's still some seats available.
Well, hopefully we call her first goal. That's what we love doing that. Calling first goals when the kids get, to high school. And She goes to Westwood, but we called first goal the other day. It was Aaron Gannon. So those are always fun, calling the first goals. You mentioned Aaron and, how supportive she was. And, your kids, you had kids while you were still coaching. It takes an incredible support system. Your social life is that,
right?
Collectively.
Yeah, for sure. Because after the games, the coaches have to have a debrief.
Yes.
So we're out debriefing
yes.
sometimes on Saturday nights, and the practices right at 5:00 in the morning. Like young kids don't know that. Hey, it's 5:30. You just heard Dad go out the door. Don't get up.
Yes.
So they get up, and then they wake my wife up, and and then the witching hours also are at night when she's trying to get the kids to bed. So Erin is obviously my best friend. She's amazing. She's a rock star. She, part of it was very unfair to her when the kids were younger, and so it got to be to a point where the balance was not the same. It was getting way out of balance, and I've always appreciated Erin in taking care of the kids and doing stuff like that. She's the best mom, and I love her to death, and it just felt like it was it wasn't fair to her. So so that's
what an amazing support system though.
Right. I wouldn't have been able to do it. I wouldn't have been able to enjoy
to be there after the wins and losses though too. That's something that I think is a big part too. To kind of bring you back down to earth. And I see a lot of it with Abby. Abby Brown Siebert, Matt Siebert's wife. Yeah. She's at these games. They have a 1-year-old, Cal. She's up top in the warm area. She's amazing support. Shout out Abby. Just an amazing a support system for Matt, who's doing a terrific job at the high school level. Really excited to cover those games this year. Maybe we get you on for a little play-by-play.
A little play-by-play. That sounds good.
We can squeeze you in. We'll find like maybe a can game. Christmas break, something like that.
Yeah, I've always been told I have a face for radio, so that might help.
My boss told me that today, and I was like, what, you're lucky I can take that. And then a couple other questions I wanted to ask just before we close out.
Sure.
How important was it to come back to play for your alma mater, special program that you had an opportunity to play for and win for, and what does it mean to you to wear that W?
Well, it meant a lot. It's it's cool because I think back to when I was a kid. Some of the greatest memories I have were because of Westwood, living in Westwood, having the friends that I had, having the experiences I had, with sports. Hockey was obviously my favorite sport, but we had a pretty good baseball team my senior year as well, and got to the state semis. So, all these memories that I have of all the fun and stuff like that from an athletic standpoint was when I was here in Westwood. So it was great to come back and be the coach here for a long time. And
and one person I can't forget, we mentioned how amazing Aaron was, for support, and has been your partner, Alice Welby, a absolute first ballot Hall of Fame Westwood legend for supporting hockey. She would come with the cowbells. They'd tell her, you can't do that. She would tell them, walk. Amazing lady that would, also drive you and your brothers to and from practice. Yeah. Huge heart. She is Westwood hockey through and through.
Yeah, she is. And what's funny is when my brother Kevin was on the hockey team in the 80s, she was the one that drove the school bus to the games, for the away games. So, so myself and my brother Tommy used to be able to get on the bus, and we'd be sleeping on top of the bags coming home from Franklin after an 8:00 game. But she drove the bus. She was always fully invested in our sports. And yes, she somewhere along the way found a cowbell that has been by her side.
That wasn't initiated in the 80s. At some point,
I'm not sure exactly when it got picked up on. But yeah, she's been a tremendous support for all of us. And she goes to all our kids' sporting events now. She's, today's Friday, so if I didn't get her the weekend schedule today, I was going to be in hot water. Fortunately, I got that out to her. So, but she's been great and very supportive. And, we're very fortunate that to have someone that cares. And even after I retired from the coaching scene, she still was going to the Westwood High School
See her
hockey
there.
games. Yeah.
So. She loves it.
Yeah.
It's in her DNA.
And a shout out to her. She's turning, I think it's 82.
Happy birthday.
In a couple of weeks.
Happy birthday, Alice. Yeah. Thank you so much for being at the biggest games. It was important to us, and we would hear that bell and it would fire us up. No question about that. Matt Siebert had a quote for you too. I want to read it. What you meant to him, obviously as a player, and kind of what it's turned into him today as a coach. He said, as a player, Mike challenged me both on and off the ice, making me a better hockey player, but more importantly, a better person. As his assistant, I learned so much from him. He's the definition of a hockey mind. I wouldn't be the head coach for the Wolverines if I didn't grow up and learn under him. And still to this day, he's a great friend that I can lean on for advice or a word of encouragement. And although 6 seasons have passed since we've been behind the bench together, the coaching staff text thread is still alive and well, needling each other.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's one thing about being on the staff. You have to give it and you have to take it.
You do. And it's fun because I'm still on the text chain.
Yeah.
One of them, I'm sure there's, one with
a few,
but we're always, busting each other's chops, and it's even out of season, golf season, doesn't matter.
Of course.
And then last thing I want to end with is Stephen McDonald, you're probably your best friend. You got a lot of best friends. But Stephen, you meant a lot to him. And it was so special for him to be able to coach with you. You guys are obviously the godfathers of each other's kids.
Right.
He had a little message for you. He couldn't fit it all on, he didn't follow the directions like Tim and Matt did with, a little excerpt. He actually provided a video. So I want to play that video for you, so you can hear a few words of what your assistant coach, Stephen McDonald, had to say about the impact of what it was to coach with you, Coach.
Wow. Hey, Morgan, Coach Mac here. Thanks very much for asking me to participate in this event to commemorate Westwood Hockey and Mr. Michael Welby as well. So I appreciate it. Welbs and I had a terrific run together, and there's not a day that I'm either playing or coaching that I don't look back and pull from the lessons I learned, and a lot of which was grounded in what he taught me, not just at hockey, but in life, sincerely. So he's become a very good friend of mine, a godfather to my daughter. I'm a godfather to his son. And quite honestly, without hockey, our paths would not be nearly as close. We'd likely be acquaintances and not very good friends. So I thank hockey for that. I certainly do. I thank Westwood Hockey specifically and the culture that is part of the fabric of that. But specific to Welbs, he definitely, I can attest to the fact that he made me a better hockey player. He would contest that I'm a good hockey player altogether. But anyway, playing D against him in all those morning practices, and how good he was, how skilled he was, how challenging it was to keep up with him, quite honestly, at the beginning, very much impacted my skill and the fact that I ended up and played in college. But again, that was because I played with him and other very strong players as well that graduated with us and were in those years. But eventually I caught up to him, and I tried my hardest to put him on his back, quite honestly. But that was just to make him a better player, of course. So he may deny that I ever caught up to him. But anyway, definitely made me a better coach as well as a player. Coaching with him, again, for almost 20 years was a tremendous learning experience. And I carry that forward today, and I'm actually blessed because his daughter now is playing in the same club program as my daughter. And also my daughters have been invited from enemy territory to come play back in Westwood as well. So our daughters have grown very tight as well. Another benefit that goes back to the foundation of Westwood Hockey and all that we did together. So the way that I coach is absolutely grounded in what he taught, and the way he saw the game, which was kind of next level, and not just from a tactician perspective, but the basics of, that some people don't realize that are basics of time and space and things along those lines. So absolutely has benefited me as a coach, and all those that I currently coach and have coached in the past. But most importantly, he honestly has made me a better person. And I can say that through things outside of hockey, but just looking at the journey we had together in hockey, some of the things that far outweighed all the wins that he and we all racked up were the number, unfortunately, of people that passed away that were close to the program, whether it be the first year we coached together when a couple of the kids on the team who are still near and dear to us, their sister passed away, and Coach Welbs helped lead that, and I did just by being his assistant, but we kind of did it on the fly. But taking hockey, setting it aside, and really making sure that everyone understood how important the value of family was, and ultimately coming together as a team. And he told the mother of that family who lost their daughter, when we get off the bus after winning the state championship, she expressed her appreciation for all that we had done, the program had done, to be a positive distraction during that time. And Welbs, without missing a beat, looked her right in the eyes and said, we as coaches have gotten far more than you could ever imagine out of these kids and being part of this, and we as coaches grew up as young men trying to lead these kids and really working through those situations, or that specific situation. It was a very heavy moment, but he was very sincere in the fact that it wasn't about the state championship at that point. It was really about being a part of that family and the broader family, and how strong we all were together. So that left a big impact. We also had lost one of our own that we played with, and had a lot of very early morning hours with that individual, the toughest defenseman I think ever to go through Westwood High, Chris Ruggiero. And we lost him while we were coaching his son, which was another incredible learning for me, and I'm sure Welbs as well, going through that process and trying to work through the pain and agony and anguish that Chris Jr. Was going through in the whole family. And we're still tight through Chris, who just got married recently, which is great. He's doing fantastic. And there's many more stories like that where there was pain and anguish, and we took what we could through with Welbs at the helm, and really learned and got stronger together as a team. And really, the young men learned a lot about what was important in life through that lens of Coach Welby and Welbs, and ultimately the program, Westwood High hockey. So I'm very proud to be part of the fabric, and I'm proud to have participated in this. And Welbs, I love you, kid, and good luck with the podcast. Catch you later.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
As you see, Coach, it's it's more than just hockey.
Yeah.
You know, it's more than just hockey, and you know, it's pretty much, I'd say 80% of what he said was non-hockey.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, obviously, an impact on him, impact on me. And the last question I would ask is, you know, what do you want your hockey legacy to be? You know, at Westwood, what do you want to be remembered for you know your time coaching and playing?
Well, but before I say that, I just want to say thanks to Mac. I mean,
Absolutely.
he's been, you know, he's really my best friend. We have a lot of friends and circles and things like that, but the journey that he talked about to go through together, both on and off the ice and in life. I mean, we lived together for a few years as well. Was just, you know, it's just one of the greatest joys of my life is having a friend like him. So, and it's nice to hear those words. It's very touching, and you know, I certainly appreciate it. But yeah, from a legacy standpoint, I don't know. I think I want people to, you know, to remember, I always tried to get the most out of the kids in the best way that I thought was possible. And that was through collaboration with the assistant coaches and bouncing ideas off each other. And yes, winning was always one of the main points, but not at the cost of, you know, of some other things. And, you know, the experience that these kids have when they're playing high school sports will be memories that they think about for the rest of their lives. And I hope people always will look back and say, you know, Coach Welby tried to get it right and tried to do the best with what he had, and help kids realize what their potential was, and help them to understand through our practices, through the way we conducted ourselves, how to be a good person, how to be successful in life. And you know, I think it's evident today. You know, you look at some of these kids; they have their own companies, they have unbelievable jobs. They're doing these awesome podcasts. You know,
Yeah.
we have good kids that have come through the program, really good kids. And I'm proud to have been a part of their, you know, their lives growing up and at a time that's really a crazy time for kids when you're in high school.
Yeah. Well, Coach, you are a legend. Really, you know, so happy and appreciative you were able to come on and you know, talk shop.
Yeah.
And you know, brought back some of the old memories. You know, got the hair standing up a little bit.
Yeah.
And you know, thank you so much for coming on. I know the alumni is gonna love to hear you know, some of these stories and recollect some of these memories as well. But really appreciate you coming on. And like I said, you know, maybe we get you for a game this year. A little play. I'll do the play-by-play if you want to do some color.
That'd be cool.
You know, we talk a little bit. It would be like a podcast in itself, just, you know, within the game.
Yeah.
So, you know,
yeah.
we'll figure something out.
I'd love to do that. And thank you for honestly reaching out to have this done. I'm honestly, I've said flattered so many times. I'm very flattered that that people have said the things that they've said, the opportunity to come on and talk to you. And if I just may say, what you and Evan and the whole staff here are doing for the town of Westwood with these podcasts, with the highlights and the calls for the high school games, these kids are so fortunate to have that. And I look back, we didn't really have something like this. So I just think it's totally cool. It takes sometimes people to take that opportunity and run with it. I think you guys have done it. You guys have done an awesome job.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing more of the content that you guys put together over the months to come.
I appreciate it. And thank you for, you know, giving a shout out to them. You know, one thing I want to say is I live in Westwood. Melinda lives in Westwood. Evan, Charlotte, and Marie don't. They love this town. The dedication, they're some of the most talented people I've ever worked with. Their dedication to this town is unmatched. They do a lot of the government meetings too, and some of them go till 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes they sleep in the office,
Wow.
you know, from covering those meetings. So some of the most amazing people, you know, I've come across are part of this team, and so lucky to have Westwood Media Center. So thank you for giving them a shout out, you know, and thank you again for coming on, and, you know, really appreciate, you know, the opportunity to be able to connect, you know, and have some of these conversations and the stories and whatnot. Yeah. And, you know, I hope you, the audience, you know, enjoy it. I know I did. And looking forward to seeing you again soon. So thank you all.